Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Owens from the Reimagine Schools podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 155 of the House of EdTech podcast, I'm going to share a little bit about my remote learning experiences. I'm going to share over 200 free educational resources, and I went out to social media and I said you could ask me anything. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. What is up? Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thanks for making House of EdTech a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. We got a fun episode for you today. We've got a couple of announcements here at the top of the show, and this first one is really cool. I mean, they're both really cool, but this one is super cool as it relates to podcasting. I want to let you know that this podcast, and actually any other podcast you listen to, is now 1 in a million. As I record this episode, it has been reported by my podcasting friend Daniel J. Lewis on one of his websites, mypodcastreviews.com, that there are now 1 million active podcasts available in the world right now. There are over 1 million active individual podcasts. That is so freaking cool. Let's be honest. To go along with that, there are over 28 million episodes of podcasts available. That is just so cool. And I'm a part of that. You know, that if you didn't know, I love podcasting. I love doing this. I got some things that I'm going to share about this podcast near the end of the episode. So make sure you stick around through the whole thing because I got some stuff to share at the end. But man, it is just so cool. I started this back in 2014 and here we are in 2020, 6 years later. And podcasting is just so powerful. You know, if you go to chrisnesi.com, if you have any interest in podcasting, I've done a number of episodes on this show about how to get started. I've presented on it. The fastest resource, if you're interested in doing anything with podcast or even exploring some content creation, go to chrisnesi.com/school podcasts. And there'll be a link in the show notes for that at chrisnesi.com/155. But I mean, I just love doing this, and I'll throw this in. I didn't even have this in my notes that I'm looking at. I've been enjoying live streaming with AJ Bianco and Stacy Lindis for Podcast PD. We've been doing that the last few Sundays here in the spring of 2020. And as I'm recording and releasing this on April 19th, we'll be back at it again today. And if you want to kind of keep up with that, make sure you head over to podcastpd.com/live on Sunday nights at 8:30. And if you go over there and we're not there, there'll probably be a reason, but I think we're going to start to do more live podcasting. So, if you've ever got questions, that's a place that you can also kind of come and get your questions answered live about creating content. But anyway, I'm going too far down the rabbit hole. If you have other questions about podcasting, go to chrisnesi.com/feedback. Next up, second big announcement, and he'll probably be upset that I didn't put it first. Not that it's the number 2 announcement, but it just happens to be number 2. And I just want to wish a very special happy birthday to my dad. That's right, the OG Mr. Nesi. It's his birthday today, April 19th. So happy birthday to my dad. And if you want to get to know John Nesi a little bit, go to episode 100 or episode 108. That's the 2 episodes that he's appeared on so far. And obviously, I think one of the most important episodes I've done in the history of the show is episode 100, because that was just me and my dad just kind of riffing and talking education. And you can kind of get a sense of who he is and kind of figure out, oh, that's where Chris gets it. So happy birthday, Dad. Love you so much. All right, so for this episode's EdTech Thought, I want to share with you 6 daily questions that you can ask yourself in quarantine. Now, this comes from an article from the greatergood.berkeley.edu website. It's an online magazine. And the author of this particular article and creator of these questions is a young lady by the name of Brooke Anderson. She is a Bay Area-based organizer and photojournalist, so not in education, but in some sense we are all teachers to somebody. And Brooke has spent the last 20 years building movements for social, economic, racial, and ecological justice. She is a proud union member of the Pacific Media Workers Guild, a member of the CWA 39521 and the AFL-CIO. She is on Twitter and Instagram at Movement Photographer. And these are questions that she came up with to ask yourself in quarantine. And when I came across this, I said, 1, I should be asking myself these questions. And number 2, I need to share them with you. So here we go. Question 1. And these are 6 questions you could ask yourself each day. Maybe you journal, or you just want to give yourself something to think about to start each day. So number 1, what am I grateful for today? Number 2, who am I checking in on or connecting with today? Number 3, what expectations of quote unquote normal am I letting go of today? Number 4, how am I getting outside today? Number 5, how am I moving my body today? And number 6, what beauty am I creating, cultivating, or inviting into my life today? I just think these are 6 really good questions that everybody should be considering right now. I'm going to be considering them and have been considering them since I came across the article, and I hope that you will add these to your morning routine as well. And that's my EdTech Thought. For this episode's EdTech recommendation, I want to share with you 200 plus free educational resources. Now, I'm not going to list all 200 and more educational resources, but I did come across an article on the website that I frequent called openculture.com, and I'll include a link to this massive list that is really awesome in the show notes out at chrisnessy.com/155. But this list, this collection, provides free educational resources for K-12 students, their parents, and people like you. On this page, you will find free video lessons, free tutorials, free apps, free audiobooks, ebooks, textbooks, links to quality YouTube channel content, free world language lessons, assessment and test prep materials, and free web resources in academic subjects like literature, history, science, and computer science. So definitely go to chrisnessy.com/155 to get the link and check out this really awesome list of resources on openculture.com. And that's my EdTech recommendation. So in preparation for this episode, I thought it would be fun to put out on social media, whether it was Twitter, Instagram, the House of EdTech Facebook group, I put out the call for an AMA, also known as Ask Me Anything. And a few people responded, so I'm going to address the questions that they asked here on this episode. So first up is a question from Chandler Ragsdale. She is at Chuties Woo on Twitter. That's CHOOTIESWU. And she asks the following. As a new aspiring elementary school teacher, I am eligible to be hired in the 2020-2021 academic year and have already submitted applications. What resources and supplies should I begin accumulating before next school year starts? What are the things I need to prioritize? Chandler, I think that is a great question. And having worked with a student teacher last school year, Luke, the student teacher, I've got some thoughts on this. Now, I was able to give Luke kind of like a goodie bag or a swag bag at the end of his semester student teaching with me to set him up with some physical things like a nice bag and pens and pencils. And my in-class support teacher, Brian, also contributed some things to the bag to kind of get him started with some of the physical things that you would need. Now, there's a lot of articles about that stuff, but this is the House of Ed Tech. So I'm going to put a different spin on things I think you need in your first year of teaching to get started, or some things you might want to think about. Now, the first thing is Twitter, and you've already got Twitter. But what I want to strongly recommend is that you start to connect with other teachers and areas of interest that will help you as a teacher. There are hashtags for first-year teachers. There is a hashtag for new teachers to Twitter. You just need to go to Twitter and start to search for education and start to connect with people. And when you find valuable people that you are connected with on Twitter, look at who they're following, look who follows them, and start to grow your network. The first year of teaching can be very isolating. Actually, every year of teaching could be very isolating depending on where you are. And I once had a principal tell me, not personally, but to a whole group of people, that we as teachers are responsible for making our own sunshine. And part of me thought, wow, that's a really poor way to look at it. And then part of me over the years has reflected and thought, you know what? I guess we are in some ways responsible for making our own sunshine. And Twitter is a great way to connect with people who can push your thinking and inspire you. And you can ask questions and get ideas just like you've done here. You saw my call out on Twitter and you went over to the website and you sent me an email to ask your question. So get connected with people. Along the lines of getting connected, I also recommend you check out the app Voxer, Voxer. It is like Twitter, but for audio. And there are many Voxer groups out there where you can connect with teachers and ask questions and kind of have this voice thread going with other people. And it's another way to connect and put a more personal touch. I mean, Twitter is nice, but obviously being somebody who creates a podcast, I see the value in voice and listening. So Voxer is also a great way to build your professional or your personal learning network and have actual conversations with people who you want to connect with. More along the lines of how you're going to interact with students and use technology, I would also recommend that you consider learning more about and find ways that you can leverage right off the bat something like Remind, which will allow you and any teacher to send text messages to your classes and communicate with students without getting their phone numbers. They don't know your phone numbers, that whole thing. You can get your parents on board when you get in there. So if you learn more about Remind and a lot of the things that it can do to communicate with students and kind of eliminate excuses and kind of knock down the walls of your classroom, I think you'll also find that to be very valuable as well. The next tool I want to recommend is Loom, Loom, and that's something that's been very popular, and it's, of course, my official House of Ed Tech screencasting recommendation. And again, we're living in times right now here in spring 2020 where you are going to be looking to create virtual content and screencasts and videos around content. And I mean, as you're preparing for that first year of teaching, that summer before, if you have an idea of what you're going to be teaching, it might be a great time to start to make some of those screencasts and videos that might be valuable. You know, if you're going to be in a place where you have a learning management system where you can have directions or a welcome video or whatever the case may be, video is a great way to do that. And Loom is a really great screen capturing tool that you can capture your webcam, you can capture your desktop, you can capture individual programs on your computer. And, you know, I had Nate Nagel on here a number of episodes ago back in the 90s, in one of the 90 episodes, where he talked about how he makes videos when he's absent. And that inspired me, and I've also done that. And Loom is a tool that I use to make a screencast to provide directions. So start to think about, you know, those days when maybe you're not going to be in school, even as a first year teacher, or, you know, even the veteran teacher should also think about leveraging a tool like Loom to create content. And again, here in the spring of 2020, we're all creating content, screencasts, and presentations. So we're all building up our library of resources that can be used. Speaking of that, start to create presentations, whether it's Keynote or PowerPoint or Google Slides or some other presentation tool that's out there. Start to create presentations that you might use in your first year of teaching. Maybe you can start to put together a welcome slideshow that you might use when you first meet your students, or start to put together that back to school night presentation. Or again, if you have an idea of what you're going to be teaching, start to prepare even lessons or put together skeleton notes in a presentation. And then when the time comes to really get into planning a particular unit or a topic, you've already got some infrastructure in place to create those presentations that you might use with your students. Other things you might want to consider would be Nearpod or Pear Deck, where again, you're going to get a little more student engagement. So you might also find that to be valuable as well. Two more things. I would recommend you consider building and creating a teacher website. Whether it's Wix or Blogger or Weebly, there's any number of tools out there where you can start to have a presence on the web, and you can make it a place where you direct parents, put a syllabus or your class rules. And, even if you get hired in a district or move to a district where they have a system in place where they have a certain platform for teacher websites, you can always just put on, your district's provided website, click here to go to my official website that I do maintain that is current. I do the same thing in my school. We have the on-course learning management system. And on my teacher website, I have a link out to where I actually put stuff, which is Google Classroom. So that lets my students and parents know that any updates and things that they want to know about in detail as we go through the school year is going to be available in Google Classroom. But I still have that teacher page that makes the school district happy because I'm using it. And last but not least, podcasts. Listen to lots of podcasts. You've got time here in the summer. Start to find podcasts that provide you with that anytime, anywhere professional development. Now, of course, I'm going to recommend that you start with the Education Podcast Network, but there are so many podcasts out there. Again, as I said at the top of this show, there are now 1 million podcasts. So go to Stitcher, go to Google Podcasts, go to Apple Podcasts, search for the things that you're interested in and learning about. And I would recommend, don't just keep to education. Whatever you want to learn about, podcasts are awesome for learning anything you want. And I got to say it, if there's no podcast for what you want to learn about or something you know about and want to dive deeper into, then you be the one to create that podcast. Chandler, this was a fantastic question. It allowed me to share my thoughts on so many things, and I hope that you found value, and I'm sure that anybody else who listens to this is also going to find value as well. And if you have other recommendations for things that Chandler could consider, go out to the show notes at chrisnessy.com/155 and leave a comment for Chandler to check on, or again, connect with her on Twitter. She is at ChootiesWoo, ChootiesWU. All right. Next question comes from Emily Ross, and she can be found at mytechclassroom.com. And she emailed me, and her question was, what are your tips for adapting your traditional way of teaching to teaching online? So I gave Emily's question some thought, and I jotted down I came up with 8 things to consider when adapting the traditional way of teaching to moving your teaching online. So here are the 8 things that I've come up with. Number 1, when teaching online, we want to recognize that there are new ways of doing things beyond traditional ways of doing things. So for example, let's take something with writing and reading. We can go beyond a traditional 5-paragraph essay or different types of writing. This could include things like asking students to build websites, recognizing misinformation or fake news on the internet, and building other kinds of interdisciplinary content when we're asking them to do things. Number 2, the effective online teacher, you are going to be thoughtful about the multiple intelligences and ways of learning things that we can do in an online environment. For example, offer your students a video, audio, text, or even a game-based version of the same information so that they can access it on their own terms and in a format that works best for them. Number 3, the effective online teacher will model for their students the use of computers for play versus work, because let's be honest, many times students need help figuring out what's appropriate given the circumstance that we're in. So let them know that it's okay to play games, and whether it's cool math games or something, that the technology can also be used for leisure. Number 4, Effective online instructors and teachers will recognize different kinds of technology equity, whether that's the actual hardware that students use to get onto the web or the internet bandwidth itself, or whether students even have access to quiet spaces to be able to get online and interact with their peers. For individuals who have difficulty using a keyboard or using other kinds of interfaces, think of those with visual impairments, for example. You need to think a little bit differently about how you can present information and content. Maybe a podcast or other voice-based system, you can have your students listen as opposed to having to watch things. Number 5, the effective online teacher. I think you're going to recognize the different affordances of different kinds of video and audio communication technology. Are you open to communicating with other teachers and your students in non-traditional ways? I encourage you to do everything you can to explore new technologies and think about the novel ways that you could be better integrating this into your classroom, whether it's face-to-face or online. Number 6, participation in an online environment as either an instructor or as a student requires you to be a self-starter, which means being able to create a physical space so that you're not distracted when you're trying to participate positively in an online learning environment. Number 7, because you don't have the same kinds of cues that you get in a face-to-face classroom, you have to use other kinds of information to decide whether or not students are participating and to what degree they are engaged. How do you account for participation? You have to give it some serious thought. And number 8, rather than have students complete something like a traditional 5-paragraph essay or a multiple-choice test, this is an opportunity to have your students produce something that is both meaningful to them and that fits their community or personal learning environment. And actually, it will take advantage of the technologies they are using rather than just kind of having them do whatever. So take advantage of it. Emily, I hope that helps you and, you who's listening with me right now. I hope these 8 things to consider you find valuable, and, we'll see where it goes from there. If you have other tips on how to adapt your traditional teaching to online learning, distance learning, whatever term you're using, wherever you are, go to the show notes at chrisnesi.com/155, leave a comment, or go to chrisnesi.com/feedback. I have a Just Give It a Try submission. Got some nice audio feedback from a nice young woman named Mindy, and I'm going to let Mindy take it away and share something that she did based on listening to a previous episode of the House of EdTech podcast. Let's go to the House of EdTech answering machine.
You have one new message.
Hi, Chris. This is Mindy Pastazak from Richmond, Virginia, and I just listened to episode 150 of the House of EdTech. I'm a little bit behind, but I really enjoy your show. I was super interested in the mind mapping idea that you were sharing on that episode, and I wanted to suggest Poplet or Mind Miser as additional online mind mapping tools. I've used them with my 4th and 5th grade classes to help them organize their research for their passion projects. Keep up the great work, and thanks for all those wonderful ideas.
Mindy, thank you for leaving some audio feedback. Obviously, that warms my heart to hear people's voices. And thank you for sharing Poplet and Mind Miser. Those are 2 tools that I probably talked about in earlier episodes at some point or on a House of EdTech Smackdown. But yes, those are 2 really good tools for doing mind mapping, and they're going to be good for any level. Now, for Just Give It a Try, this again is always a segment where I put your voice front and center, and you can do that by submitting your ideas of something that has worked or even not worked in your teaching practice by going out to chrisnesi.com/feedback or chrisnesi.com/flipgrid. Thanks for checking out this episode, number 155 of the House of EdTech podcast. Thank you to Mindy and Emily and Chandler for submitting content for this episode. Let's keep the conversation going. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on everything I talked about in this episode and the resources that I shared, you can go out and leave a comment on the show notes at chrisnessy.com/155, or you can go out to chrisnessy.com/feedback and you can leave a SpeakPipe message or send me an email, or you can get onto the Flipgrid. There's a number of ways you can get in touch with me, and I love to connect with you. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, hey, thank you so much. I create this for me. I create this for you, but you can help me out. Go tell somebody else about the podcast. Maybe this episode would be really good for a friend of yours. Maybe another episode inspired you, or you feel it could inspire somebody else. Go share the podcast. If you share it on social media, use the hashtag HouseOfEdTech, or tag on Instagram at HouseOfEdTech, or at HouseOfEdTech on Twitter, at Mr. Nessie. I'm everywhere. You could also become an awesome supporter of the House of EdTech podcast. The Awesome Supporter Program is powered by Patreon.com, and that allows a consumer of content like you to support a creator of content like me. Special thanks to all of my awesome supporters, who include Anthony Arnaud of the New Teacher Podcast. You can find it at newteacher.org. Eric Kurtz from Control-Alt-Achieve. You can find that at controlaltachieve.com. Dan Gallagher. Find his writings and tech musings at gallaghertech.edublogs.org. Carlos Garza, a.k.a. Mr. G. He hosts a cool podcast called the Aced Tech Podcast. You can find it at aced.tech. Peggy George. Connect with Peggy on Twitter at pgeorge. Jen Giffen, the Canadian sister. She is co-host of the Shooks and Gift podcast. You can find that at shooksandgift.com. Jeff Herb. Connect with Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Herb. Mike Messner, my man from California. Hope you're doing well. Connect with Mike on Twitter at TeacherMike72. At JP Prezavento from the Bits and Bytes of Education podcast. Connect with everything that JP is doing out at his website, jpprez.com, and that's Prez with 2 Z's. And last but not least, Kyle Wilcox at Level Up Ed Tech. Thanks everybody for all your support. If you want to be awesome, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the podcast is going to be episode 156. That's going to come your way on May 3rd, 2020. And until next time, thanks for learning with me. And remember, using technology isn't difficult. Just give it a try. And as promised, thank you for sticking around. So the loyal listeners are going to be right here, right now. And I wanted to share that I recorded this episode on a brand new microphone. I recorded this episode and will be going forward with the Shure SM7B, which is a dynamic XLR microphone. The biggest reference I can give for this microphone is that it is the microphone used by Michael Jackson in the 80s. So this microphone is used in major recording studios, and I have upgraded my setup to include this. And things like this are made possible by the awesome supporters. So I was able to kind of take all that support and, save and invest it right back here into the podcast. So I'd love to know what you think of the audio in this episode. Did you notice a difference? Did you not notice a difference? Or just give me your thoughts in general. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.